Tim is in big trouble. Big trouble. I've been trying very, very hard not to talk about this birthday. I've been very determined not to talk about this birthday, but yesterday was my birthday and it was a big one. I'm just gonna, in a spirit of full disclosure, so we can get everything on the table and get to know each other better. How many, if you are a new student at Grand Canyon, put your lips up. That is a lot of people, so we don't know each other that well. So in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm just gonna tell you. I was 60 years old yesterday, 60 years old. Now, let me tell you what happens when you turn 60. This is what happens. So, I have 4 boys, and we play golf. We've been playing golf since they've been this tall. And my oldest son is now 30 years old, and he's a professional golfer, and so he humors me, and he's a good son, and every now and then he invites me to play with his buddies. And so yesterday was that day. Now, he is very good. He played the U.S. Open last year, and his buddies are very good, and so I've been nervous about this. But we went out and played. It was a lot of fun getting to play with him, because I don't get to play with him that much. But here's what happened. I got off to a slow start. I got better, and so it wasn't totally embarrassing. But he's really a good kid. He's like his mother. He's always trying to help. And so I could tell there was something on his mind. And so about it used to be the reverse, right? He was 6 or 7 years old, and I was always teaching him, and I was always helping him. And so when you get 60, you need help. And so about 16, I knew he wanted to tell me something, but he wasn't sure if he should. And finally, he decided, I'm going to take it. He said, Dad, listen, he said, because I was playing 50 yards behind them on every shot, and he said, I think I can help you here. I want you to hit the drive with my driver because it's got a stiffer shaft. He said, you need a stiffer shaft. It sounds counterintuitive, but to hit the ball farther, you got to hit it lower, you got to hit it with some top spin, you got to get it to roll. Your shaft is, and you don't have, he said, you don't swing fast. He said, you don't swing fast, so a stiffer shaft isn't going to hurt you. And I wanted to stop him right there and say, I'm swinging as fast as I can swing. And, but I didn't say that. Welcome. Miracles happen, right? Big miracles and small miracles. Isn't this kind of a small miracle today? Give me a thumbs up if you either have a sweatshirt on or a long sleeve shirt or a jacket. It's great to be in Phoenix today. It's going to be a high of 72 and it's going to be raining, so we should expect some small miracle today. I want to talk about Peter today. I want to talk about Peter, but I want to start by putting that in some context. I just became a board member at the Dream Center. Have any of you been to the Dream Center? Amen. Very good, very good. I mean, it's right in our neighborhood, and it's a hotel that was been changed and into a place where they literally take people off the streets, drug addicts, alcoholics, prostitutes. They take people off the street, they bring them in there. They're there from anywhere between 6 and 18 months. A program is assigned to them, and there's transformation that happens. It's kind of fun to go around there. It's fun to go there because it's fun to see that transformation. It's hard work. It's all done by volunteers, but the transformation that takes place is really remarkable. You see people that were lost, and then you see people that have gained conviction. It's brought purpose to their life, and you can actually see the courage in them. It's amazing. People that would not look you in the eye or couldn't lift their heads up because they felt so guilty about their life, about their empty life. And now you go back and you talk to some of those people and they believe in something and they've got purpose, and you can see that purpose come alive because they have courage. You know, Americans like that, right? We all like that. I was in Philadelphia a couple weeks ago, and I do like most people do. I wanted to go to the place where Rocky ran up the stairs, right? They got a statue for him there. And this is a guy that had a drab life. He had an empty life. There was nothing happening in his life. And we all kind of felt sorry for them. And then he met this girl, and something started to come alive in him. There was a belief that started to happen. And he didn't want to be just a bum from the neighborhood. He wanted to be somebody. And so the conviction starts to grow, and the purpose starts to appear, and there gets to be courage. And so he builds himself up, and eventually he gets this fight against the heavyweight champion of the world. And you all remember that first Rocky movie, even if you're as young as you are. And Apollo Creed is the champion of the world. He's supposed to squash him in 3 or 4 rounds. but Rocky has gained something. He's changed. He's transformed. He's become somebody different. And about midway through the fight, the champion is saying, who is this guy? Who is this? This guy's a bum from the neighborhood. Who is this guy? He should be knocked out already. But something's happened. Something transformed him. A couple weeks ago, after Philadelphia, I was actually in Rome. And it was my first time to be in Rome. And we had 2 days there that were back-to-back days that were so interesting to me because of the transformation that they represented. Here, on one day, we went to the Roman Colosseum. The Roman Colosseum is this place that was the forerunner of all the athletic facilities, the big arenas that we see today. It was where all kinds of athletic events happened in Rome in the time of Christ. And it got to be a place that eventually, because of the early growth of Christianity, with Peter as the leader of the church became intimidating to the Romans. And so they would actually bring in, and this is true, they would actually bring in wild animals, lions and tigers. They would starve them, and they showed us the places where they would house the lions. And then they showed us the places where they would put the people. And this is not a movie, this is true. They're putting people here, and they're putting starving lions and tigers over here, and they're releasing the people, then they're releasing the lions, and there were 70,000 people that were cheering as these people were torn apart. This really happened. 50, 100 years after Christ, this was happening. And then the next day, we went to St. Peter's Basilica. And St. Peter's Basilica is probably the biggest church in the world. It took 120 years to build this church. The artwork and the sculpture is absolutely awe-inspiring. It tells the biblical story of creation and fall and the flood and Passover and the release of the Israelites, the wandering in the desert, the taking. It tells the whole story, and it's done with a level of excellence that just you walk around there and you think, how did this happen? How did this transformation take place? These small group of people who were being fed to the lions started a movement that inspired this church that took 100 years to build. You know, I walked around there and I thought, these people were really believers. These people had this biblical story in their hearts. It was there and it meant something for them to create something like this. How do transformations like that happen? Peter, we're going to use a story. We're going to run through the book of Mark a little bit today. And then we're going to go to 1 Peter because John Mark was a mentee of Peter. Peter was the mentor. And Peter's preaching and teaching was what Mark recorded in his gospel. The 16 chapters in Mark were written by John Mark, but they basically are Peter's preaching and teaching about his experience with Jesus and what that experience was like. Peter's probably 12 or 13 years younger than Jesus. In fact, I think what's so interesting about this, Peter, when he was called by Jesus, about your age, he was 17 or 18 years old. He was not a very old guy. He was a very young guy. He was a fisherman. And here's what was going on in Palestine at that time. Romans ruled, and that was an abomination to the Jewish people, but they had no choice. I mean, they were defeated and they were controlled. But what was really bad was that the Jewish leadership, it was a theocracy, and so the Jewish leadership, the high priest and all of his people were making deals with the Romans. As long as you can't beat them, join them, I guess was what they were thinking, but they were making sure that they got a piece of the tax that was supposed to go to Rome. They wanted to get a piece of that, plus they wanted to uptick the amount of temple tax people had to pay. And the peasants, the farmers and the fishermen, they knew what was going on. They knew what was going on, and obviously weren't happy about that. Not only are they being controlled by an outside group, but their own Jewish leadership, who's supposed to be supporting them, has kind of joined in with the Romans. And it's getting tough to eke out a living. And so Peter's a fisherman, and like other peasants, he's getting squeezed. He's not really happy. And there were Jewish rabbis that were talked about as being potential messiahs. The people were looking for a new David. They were looking for a messiah, somebody that could throw off the Roman rule and fix the Jewish leadership problem. And so one day, Peter is casting his net. He is in his boat, he's casting his net. It's just another day. You know, it's just another day. I'm throwing my net in the water. I gotta see what I can do today. My family's hungry. Most of this I'm paying in taxes. I'm not happy about that. And here comes Jesus. Jesus is wandering down the Sea of Galilee. He started his mission work. He's looking for followers. He walks by Peter and he says 2 words. He says, "Follow me." And Peter drops his net. He drops his net. He gets up, and just like that, he's gone. He's with Jesus. Now understand, Jesus was preaching and he was teaching and he had some charisma. People talked about him like he was one who spoke with authority. When he spoke, people listened, and he seemed to have wisdom and knowledge and insight into the world that was especially attractive, and Peter knew something about that, and so he didn't have much of a life anyway, and so when the rabbi, who's gaining some attention, says, "Follow me," Peter says, "Fine." And he's gone, and the adventure begins. And the thing that's exciting about the adventure is Jesus is talking about a new order, a new kingdom. He's talking about the kingdom of God. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven. He's talking about something new, a new order. Peter's excited about this. Jesus gets 11 other apostles, and those become his leadership group. And it's good enough that Jesus' message has some oomph to it, because that gives them some promise. Maybe this is the new David, but then what happens is what? In chapters 2 through 4, Jesus starts doing miraculous things. There are blind people that he gives sight to, and there are deaf people that he gives them a voice, and there are sick people that he heals, and there are hungry people that he feeds, as many as 5,000 at a time. Can you imagine the apostles and Peter are getting excited about this? Not only does this guy seem to have uncommon wisdom, but this guy can do miraculous things. This has to be the new David. This has to be the Messiah. And in fact, the things they get excited about are the healings and the feeding, but this is what they get really excited about. And it's in Matthew chapter 4, 35 to 41. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." It's amazing, just 3 words. Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." You know that he was healing people. He was giving blind people sight. He was giving deaf people a voice. But what really terrified them was this incident. This was a little bit of a turning point. This terrified them. They're out on the boat, and they're used to storms. They're fishermen. They're used to storms. There were lots of them on the Sea of Galilee, but this one was really bad. And with 3 words, Jesus calms the storm. This guy has power literally over nature. So they were terrified at this, but can you imagine Peter? Peter's probably also getting excited. This is really going to happen here. This guy can do it for us. This is really going to happen. How do we know that? A little bit later in Mark 9, verses 33 and 34, Mark 9 verses 33 and 34, thank you. The apostles came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet on the way because they had argued about who was the greatest. See, they were all getting ready. They were getting ready. This is going to be the new order, and we're going to be the rulers of the new order. They were getting very excited about this. This guy has control and power even over nature. And Jesus sensed something's changing here. And I've got to get more specific with these people. The first 8 chapters of Mark are about who Jesus was. The second 8 chapters are about his purpose. And so Mark chapter 8, verse 27 to 33, this is what I really want to focus on today, these verses. And if you would, maybe go back later in the week and focus on them again, because this is the human condition. If you're going to have a purposeful life and not an empty life, If you're going to have a purposeful life and not an empty life, I think you have to understand what Jesus is saying in these verses. This is where things start to change. Jesus, as his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi, on the way he asked them, who do people say that I am? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Remember, he's been watching them. He's been doing this stuff in their midst for a couple years now. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say that I am? Peter answered, you are the Christ. Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. All Peter's dreams are going up in smoke here. He doesn't want to hear this. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, he said. Now this is serious. He doesn't say, get behind me, Peter. He says, get behind me, Satan. I mean, Jesus is dead serious here. You do not have in mind the things of God, but you have in mind the things of men. This is so serious because who's Peter? At this point, Peter is just another Adam. He's the old Adam. He's the self-absorbed old Adam that wanted it his way and wanted to do it without God. And Jesus knows, because he is God, the amount of destruction and the amount of pain and agony that exists in our world, the number of empty lives because of that decision. And what Peter's saying here is, I want you to do it again. You see, just after Jesus started his ministry, he went into the desert to be tempted by the devil. And he withstood that temptation. And now Peter is saying there's an easier way, there's a more enjoyable way. It's you and it's us. Let's do something right here, right now. We can help these people. And Jesus has to rebuke him and actually refer to him as Satan because he knows he's getting tempted. I thought about this last night, and I thought about the times on a daily basis that I'm tempted. And if I could have this much conviction, which would cause that much purpose, which would get to that much courage, how much better I would be. See, Jesus is the new Adam. Jesus is the new Adam. Jesus can't make the same mistake. He must die. He has to die, or this thing's not going to be restored. He knows that. He knows that he's going into the garden in a number of months, and he's going to be tempted again. Because there's an easier way. And the difficult way is going to be painful and it's going to be hard. So what do we know about Peter at this point? Well, this St. Peter's Basilica was named after him. You know, if a non-Christian would go through St. Peter's Basilica and know nothing about St. Peter's Basilica, they would say, who in the world is this Peter? Look at this place, and they named it after Peter. Who is this guy? He must be somebody very special. But I'll tell you what, at this point in Peter's life, he's nothing special at all. He's just like you and I. He's got the same self-absorption, the same focus on self that we all have. After this incident, Jesus goes on to perform more miracles, and he does more teaching, and finally his time comes, right? Jesus' time comes, and it's Palm Sunday, and he goes into Jerusalem, and then it's the Passover, and then it is the arrest, and the betrayal, and then the arrest, and then the trial. See, when people have real conviction that leads to purpose, they also have courage. Courage isn't something that comes by us naturally. It's the result of first conviction, then purpose. How do we know that Peter has no courage? Well, Peter was Matthew 14, 66 to 72, and this just hurts Peter once it's happened. But you see, he doesn't know who Jesus is yet. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were with that Nazarene, Jesus, she said, but he denied it. I don't know or understand what you're talking about, he said, and went out into the entryway. He's been with this guy for 3 years. He called him the Christ. This fellow was one of them. Again, he denied it. After a little while, those standing near Peter said, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. He began to call down curses on himself. And he swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." Immediately the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. He broke down and wept. You see, this is a little servant girl. This is a little servant girl, and Peter's a man. And Peter's seen some amazing things in his still short life. But when confronted by a little servant girl, he doesn't have the courage to stand up to the little servant girl. Why? Because Peter knows, he thinks he knows who he is, but he doesn't know the most important thing. He doesn't know who Jesus is. He doesn't know who Jesus is. And so there is no conviction, and there is no purpose, and there's no courage. Well, we all know what happens, right? Jesus dies. He rises again. He appears. He ascends. And then there's Pentecost. And Peter gets up after Pentecost and he delivers this unbelievable sermon. And then Peter stands up to both the Roman rulers and the Jewish rulers, and he preaches Christ crucified, and he preaches about who Jesus really was and what he's done. He leads an unbelievable life as the leader of the church, as it grows in influence. How does the transformation take place? How do transformations like this happen? You know, in 1 Peter 1:18, in his own words, Peter says this. He's speaking to the early Christians. "For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life. From the empty way of life handed down to you from your forefathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect." Not knowing Christ leads to a very empty life. You know, in America today, if you go into bookstores and you read pop psychology, and if you read self-help, and if you read contemporary religious thought, it's about self-discovery. If you know the right way and you can get the right mentor and you can go deep enough, you can figure out who you really are. And once you know who you really are, your life will be different. It'll make sense. And this stuff is really popular in Hollywood, and it's really popular in Washington and other places where there are important people that hang out. But we're seeing it happen right in front of us, right? And this is sad, but I'm going to tell this story anyway. You've all seen it. This little girl was raised by a Hollywood star, and she had natural acting capabilities, and she became Hannah Montana, and she was on television, and she became very popular. Some of you were raised with her. I think about my own kids. I think about myself. At 15 or 16 years old, if I got that much attention, would I be able to deal with it? So Hannah Montana becomes Miley Cyrus, and she's disintegrating right in front of us. I mean, you saw what happened at the MTV Awards, and it's just a crying out for attention. I just need to be watched and observed, and I need to be the center of attention, and that's life. See, the more self-absorbed we become, the more that we need attention, and even sometimes the more successful we are, the more empty life gets. It's just so different than what we would all expect. As you're going up that road to success, what we expect is things to get easier. You know, the more successful we get, the more money we have, the more we have, things should get easier. And they can get easier, but most often they don't because we think it's us. Having a purposeful life is not about knowing yourself better. Having a purposeful life is knowing Jesus better. It's a hard thing to understand, but when you know Jesus and who he was and what he did, your life gets put into context and everything gets to be easier, makes sense. I've never met Joel Osteen, and I think he's probably a good guy, but you know what I want to tell you is, not everything is going to go easy for you. You're going to get sick, and you're going to have successes, and you're going to have failures, you're going to have good times, and you're bad. God doesn't say it's all going to be good. It's not important that it's all good. The only thing that's important is that you know who Jesus is, because if you know who Jesus is, your life, you're going to have conviction, and that's going to lead to purpose, and that's going to give you courage, and that's the gospel. It's the courage that comes out of understanding who Jesus is that will see you through whether things are good or bad. Now listen, there's a lot of talent in this room. I'm amazed at the amount of talent in this room. And out of this room is going to become people who are great teachers and coaches and doctors and nurses and business entrepreneurs, and some of you are really ambitious about that stuff, and God put that there. God put that there for you to do what? To glorify Him and bless others. To glorify Him and to bless others. You know, if I could say one thing that I would recommend to you every morning, and I need to do this because I come out of this historical tradition of the Lutheran Church, and Martin Luther always said, you know, Jesus died once. And because He died once, we can get up every day and die to ourselves and live for Him, for His glory, and to bless other people. That ambition that you have inside of you, it's good. It's really good. As long as you understand who Jesus is, and as long as you understand that your living means dying daily to yourself, giving Him glory, and living your life in order to bless others. It's going to be a big adventure for you if you can do that. Will you pray with me, please? Father, thank you so much for a beautiful day. It's beautiful in Arizona when it's cool and when it rains. Thank you so much for bringing these students to Grand Canyon University this year. Your kingdom is going to grow, and they and us are all determined to make it about you, to glorify you, to be a blessing to others, so that your kingdom grows in this place. Thank you for all the blessings you've given us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.